This is the Everyday AI Show, the everyday podcast where we simplify AI and bring its power to your fingertips. Listen daily for practical advice to boost your career, business, and everyday life.
Can you imagine having generative AI when you were in high school? Think of how much different your life must have been or could have been, and how much different maybe your career would look like now. We're going to go and actually have some of those conversations. What does generative AI look like if you are in high school? Well, we're going to have two very bright and promising high schoolers actually today join us and help us understand what is life like with generative AI and how is AI changing the life of high school students. This should be a fun conversation. Oftentimes we don't have three people on the show. Today is one of those days, and I love talking to bright minds from the future generation. All right, so we're going to be getting into that today here in a minute, but welcome to Everyday AI. What's going on, y'all? My name is Jordan Wilson, and I am the host, and this thing is for you. Everyday AI is your daily live stream podcast and free daily newsletter, helping us all learn generative AI, keep up, and how we can leverage it to grow our companies and to grow our careers. And hey, the future of our companies are the young generation. So how are they using AI? What is it like growing up with AI? I can't wait for today's conversation. It's going to be a fun one, but make sure, if you haven't already, if you're listening on the podcast, check the show notes. There's going to be a link in there to our website, youreverydayai.com. So you can go ahead afterwards and read the recap from today's show. But let's get started as we do every single day by going over the AI news for the day, August 1st. All right, here we go. So first, more AI is coming to a drive-through near you. So Yum Brands is set to roll out even more artificial intelligence to take drive-through orders at hundreds of Taco Bell restaurants by the end of this year. So new reports show that Taco Bell is set to roll out even more AI and large language model help in its drive-thrus. So this move aims to enhance service speed, reduce labor costs, and increase sales through upselling. Taco Bell's implementation of voice AI is the most ambitious among its competitors, including Wendy's, White Castles, and other fast food chains that have tried the whole large language model order taking thing. So more than 100 Taco Bell locations in the U.S. already use voice AI, with plans to expand to 30 more restaurants soon in California. All right, Meta is growing quickly, and it is because of AI. During its earnings call yesterday, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg pointed to AI as a main reason for the company's growth. So the CEO of the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, WhatsApp, etc., really pointed to AI as a main reason for growth, and growth Meta has. Gosh, look at this. I mean, they've reported a 22% revenue growth year over year to nearly 39 billion, with 98% of the sales obviously coming from advertising on Facebook and Instagram. The growth rate has surpassed competitors, with Google's ad business only seeing an 11% increase. So more than double their biggest competitor when it comes to online advertising. So CEO Mark Zuckerberg attributes the success to AI improvements in content recommendations and ad performance. And obviously, if you didn't know, there's AI sprinkled into all of Meta's advertising options as well. All right, last but not least, Microsoft has added OpenAI to a list of competitors in its just released annual report. So Microsoft's latest annual report lists OpenAI as a competitor, marking a big shift in their relationship. So despite a long-term partnership, Microsoft and OpenAI are now vying for dominance in AI offerings, search, and news advertising. So Microsoft has also invested reportedly up to $13 billion in OpenAI and serves as its exclusive cloud provider. Also, reportedly, that $13 billion investment came with a roughly 49% equity stake in OpenAI. So OpenAI has recently announced a prototype that's pretty similar to Microsoft's Bing's. So the new search engine prototype is called Search GPT, and it does kind of directly compete with Microsoft's AI products, even though the product itself is built on their Microsoft Bing. So the partnership, though, was always understood to involve competition, according to an OpenAI spokesperson. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella was reportedly not informed before OpenAI's board temporarily ousted Sam Altman last year, OpenAI's CEO. So Microsoft has been much more involved. However, this has also invited a lot of scrutiny from federal investigators. So now, Microsoft saying, oh, yeah, they're a competitor. But are they really? I don't know. We'll leave that up to the federal investigators, right? All right. So there's going to be a lot more news in today's newsletter. So if you haven't already, go to youreverydayai.com and check out the daily newsletter. All right. Let's get into today's conversation. I'm excited for this one. So can you imagine whether it was, you were in high school 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago? Can you imagine what life would be like if you had generative AI? Well, we're going to learn today. So please help me welcome on the show. We got a couple of guests. Let's go ahead and bring them on. There we go. We have them. So please help me welcome Armaan Priyadarshan and Vasu Lakshmanan to the show. Armaan and Vasu, thank you so much for joining Everyday AI.
Thank you so much for having us. To introduce ourselves, my name is Armaan. I'm a rising senior at the Mass Academy of Math and Science at WPI. And I'm interested in pursuing computer and cognitive science. And in my free time, I like to draw and play a lot of Tetris.
Love to see it. Vasu, how about you?
Yeah, my name is Vasu. I'm also a rising senior at the Massachusetts Academy of Math and Science at WPI. And in my free time, I like to play video games, and I also like to read. And in the future, I'd like to look at the interdisciplinary field of AI and economics.
I love it. Vasu, maybe let's start with you. Let's start just big picture here, and then we'll kind of walk our way through it. But let's just start at the end. How is AI changing the lives of high school students right now?
I mean, it's really drastic. So inside the classroom, it varies from school to school. But from my personal experiences, I've seen teachers who ban AI completely to all the way to encouraging students to use AI. And there's also some teachers in the middle as well, encouraging students to use AI in some parts of their assignments, but not others. And this also varies drastically from class to class. So specifically in humanities, which is one of the classes we take where we study the interdisciplinary field of history and English, we were able to see how we used AI to generate text, but alongside that, compared that with our personal writing, using AI as a tool to not only elevate our writing, but also analyze it further.
Armaan, what about you? How would you just describe what AI is like now for high school students and how it's changing and impacting your lives?
Actually, I think in November 2022, what happened with ChatGPT, in the November of my sophomore year, is it kind of dropped like a bombshell. So a lot of things changed with the release of generative AI and large language models out to the public, and this was seen in both students and the teachers. So we had some teachers who were completely against it because we had a lot of writing assignments in my previous school, and there were some teachers who even made curriculums and tests based off of it. One notable example I think was one of our teachers. He taught religion, and basically for his tests, what we had us do is we had every single student come up with a couple of questions, and then he used those questions, those multiple choice questions, to put together a whole test for everyone. And I think earlier we had to do them all manually. We kind of had to look into it a little bit, research, do some reading of the Bible. But after that, with the release of ChatGPT, everyone was able to just kind of GPT questions, and as a result, all the tests were GPT'd as well. And that kind of it was a pretty funny experience. But as Vasu said, it kind of ranges widely. Some teachers are pretty stringent on not using AI versus some that actively encourage it. Yeah.
So at least at your school right now, is there a kind of total AI policy, or does it just kind of vary, classroom to classroom?
Yeah, I'd say it kind of varies classroom to classroom, because in some classes, for example, physics and math, you can use AI, but the level of problem solving that we kind of do is, I would say, somewhat beyond it. Like I know for a fact that like on like physics homeworks and like math homeworks and like we do like a lot of competition math, so it's a little bit more abstract. So, but like I know I've like tried to use like ChatGPT or like Gemini and sometimes like Meta AI, and that hasn't really worked out too well for me. So I'd say like some classes, like I don't even know if it is like that helpful, but then there's others that like it's like completely invaluable for.
Hmm. Uh, Vasu, how would you say that this, even within your own school, I mean, is that challenging where, maybe some classes might say, oh, you can't use Chat GPT or other AI. Some classes, it sounds like at your school are encouraging. And I'm guessing then there's some that are just like, no one's really asking, and there's not really a policy. How does that impact, your just ability to either kind of like go all in and learn alongside with AI versus like, oh, should I be using this at every step of the way? How does that kind of, inconsistency, I guess, impact your learning?
Yeah, 100%. So from my perspective, I think that, and this is my personal opinion, the future of AI is truly integrating it within our schools to help elevate the quality of it. But I definitely say that it varies from class to class in the sense that teachers have different policies towards AI, which becomes very confusing. So for example, in our foreign language classes, we're not allowed to use them at all, whereas compared to that inside our humanities classes, we are. So this could be really confusing to students in a various amount of manners, but specifically, it's really important to look at each assignment and realize what level of AI you can use, but that also varies from assignment to assignment. So I really think the future of AI, and especially probably at our school, would be to integrate it more and more because AI is in the future and it will always be impactful.
Mm. Armaan, how would you say, because you guys are actually in a nice position here, right? Because you had a year or two, of school at the high school level before generative AI, really boomed, and now you've had a year or two after. How, for you personally, has having all of these large language models impacted your learning? Is it all good? Are there some downsides to it? How has it impacted overall your high school journey? Can you talk to it from kind of both sides?
Sure. So on like one hand, I'd say it's made it a lot like significantly easier. I know in like freshman year, like this was before like ChatGPT was like available and really popular. Well, I had to like write like essays for all my classes. Like one that was like had like really tough essays was history class. I'd say because we had to like write a lot more argumentative and and position taking papers. And then for those, like I'd say like I'm kind of a perfectionist in terms of like my wording and my writing and my sentence structure. So I used to spend like hours and hours on end just like perfecting like a single paragraph. Because like I just like wasn't sure what to do with the wording and what words to use and how to make it sound coherent and like aesthetic. And I'd say like after GPT released, I just like completely changed that whole process, especially with like picking out words. Like word choice and like and wording has been like the biggest aspect of language models in helping my writing, I'd say. Because like after that, I had a different history class with the same teacher after, and my writing didn't change that much, but it took like significantly less time to write. And I'd say that for a fact has like definitely helped me out. On the other side of that, I think like one of the main like risks of GPT and other generative AI models is that it kind of like might eliminate the need for people to think at a higher level. Because if you have like a model doing all the thinking for you, it was good for us since we did have like a little bit of experience kind of just like doing stuff on our own before that. But for example, if you were like using GPT all throughout this entire process, then I could see how like you might not have to learn how to think as much at like a higher level, and GPT can kind of do your thinking for you.
Yeah, and that's huge, right? And I want to dig down a little bit on this. Vasu, what are your thoughts on this? On generative AI, and whether people realize this or not, right? And I'll make these arguments until I'm blue in the face. Like, yes, large language models can be creative, they can be strategic, they can serve as a consultant, but they can also do a lot of that thinking for you. Vasu, can you talk a little bit about that? Right? Are you having problems maybe or struggling to still think as a human, right, and to learn and to analyze critically as a human? Do you find yourself giving that to large language models a little too much, or have you been able to find kind of a nice balance?
Yeah, I think it's like you mentioned how Armaan and I, we're in a very nice position because we had about 8 years of education where we didn't have generative AI, but I could definitely see how for elementary school students or even middle school students now, how it could really change how they use AI in the future of the classroom. So as these high school classes begin to adapt alongside how students use or rather misuse AI, it will definitely have a major impact on the schooling system as a whole. But inside my experience, I'd say that AI has definitely played a crucial role inside really changing how I think. So for mundane tasks, I might distribute that to AI. Whereas for more creative tasks, I always try to prioritize my creativity. But if there's ever a time period where I might not know what to do, I might just send a general prompt to AI, and I typically get really good answers back. So it's definitely changing how creativity is working inside our society, especially from the differentiability between humans and AI in terms of creativity as well.
Hmm. Let's talk about the the bigger implications here, right? And I've talked about this many times before on the Everyday AI show. I've had a couple of students, I've had teachers, I've had educators who turned into consultants. How should higher education and even high schools throughout the country be handling generative AI? Because it seems like there's really not a lot of guidance from a federal level. There's not a lot of guidance from a state level. So it does seem like most districts or individual schools or even individual classrooms have to figure it out for themselves. Armaan, like when we look at the future of education when it comes to artificial intelligence, what kind of gets your mind spinning on ways that this could go?
I think that's a great question. It's one that's really complex and really difficult to answer. I think the number one thing that we can do is kind of work with the progress of AI. 'Cause I know like some teachers are like kind of ban it and say that we shouldn't be using it at all. Like there's no way you can use it. But like I think the harsh reality is that AI is like here and it's here to stay, and it'll be continuing to develop and get even better. And instead of like ignoring that, I think the best thing we can do is kind of work with it and see how we can like integrate it more into our classrooms while still like maintaining that level of thought that encourages people to learn how to learn, which is the number one part of education in my opinion. So I think like we talked about this a little bit in class, but like we thought about potentially how it could result in, instead of having more like writing assignments that are open-ended and have kids like do it on their own, we could have writing assignments that are in class and timed so that it's completely based on like how you can perform with just your own thought on pen and paper. But at the same time, like I'm not entirely sure how reflective that is of someone's writing style, because I know for like even before generative AI, I know like I would have definitely written a higher quality like product if I'd spent time on it like outside of just school and outside of like the classroom. And another thing that we talked about that was kind of important was integrating creative choice. Like as Vasu mentioned, like something that AI may not entirely be able to replicate for humans is that creative aspect. So having more choice in writing assignments and having like more open-ended prompts could result in I guess like a more creative process.
Yeah, no, it's great. Very, very thoughtful response there. Vasu, so picking up on what Armaan said, like, should schools be going back to this, learning is going to happen only in the classroom, pen and paper timed, or, might it be like, okay, let's all use generative AI, but use it in the classroom and timed? Like, how do you see that shaking out? Because I get that there's no maybe right or wrong answer. But how might you see the future of education shaping out as generative AI increasingly gets more and more popular?
Yeah, I think that. So I recently read a book. It's called Co-Intelligence, and it's Living with and Working with AI by Professor Malik from UPenn Wharton. And I think he sums it up really well. He draws a parallel to the time that they introduced calculators in schools. So initially, it was really a similar response where teachers were saying no calculators at all. But if you look at a high school, middle school, and even early elementary school classes, calculators are not only involved, but also encouraged as you get higher classes. And I think it's going to be similar with AI inside the near future, where we start to really adapt and integrate it into our lifestyles because it's here to stay, as Armaan mentioned. And by having students really practice it inside school, we can learn how not only to use it responsibly, but also use it inside a productive manner to not only have human and AI thought, but really bolster human thought through AI, which is definitely something that's here to stay and also here to grow.
Are you still running in circles trying to figure out how to actually grow your business with AI? Maybe your company has been tinkering with large language models for a year or more, but can't really get traction to find ROI on Gen AI. Hey, this is Jordan Wilson, host of this very podcast. Companies like Adobe, Microsoft, and NVIDIA have partnered with us because they trust our expertise in educating the masses around generative AI to get ahead. And some of the most innovative companies in the country hire us to help with their AI strategy and to train hundreds of their employees on how to use Gen AI. So whether you're looking for ChatGPT training for thousands or just need help building your front-end AI strategy, you can partner with us too, just like some of the biggest companies in the world do. Go to youreverydayai.com/partner to get in contact with our team, or you can just click on the partner section of our website. We'll help you stop running in those AI circles and help get your team ahead and build a straight path to ROI on Gen AI.
What do you think the near future, even of high schools, right? I know that you guys are now kind of transitioning, right? So you have just finished your junior year, and now for your senior year, you'll kind of be taking, college courses. You both told me that. So how should high schools be handling this, right? Because I think colleges maybe can be a little bit different. I think once you get to, colleges and universities, at least here in the US, there is more of this, kind of creative freedom. You're doing a lot more things kind of quote unquote away from the classroom anyways, but Armaan, maybe if you were in charge, right, of your high school, what changes or what policies might you put in place to find this good balance? Because I know it's not easy.
I think like the first thing is to kind of like enforce like communication, because I think like the best way to kind of get like a gauge on how you should be using AI is to kind of ask the students first, because I think like while they may just like say that yes, we should use AI for everything, like why even do stuff, they also have like I know like at least for us, like we have like a sense of responsibility with it, because we had like a class called STEM and Scientific Writing, where what our teacher did was he kind of like created an open policy where he asked us how we think we should be using AI, and then from there we were able to come up with like a couple of points, like for example, like we only use AI for summarization, we don't use AI for like actually writing our papers. And I think like just like asking the students and getting a gauge on that would be like the first step. And beyond high school, like another like crucial stage for us right now is college and college essays. I think that is something that generative AI is like could definitely like drastically impact, because I guess like if you have all these tools like available to you, it's kind of like harder for colleges to gauge how good of a writer you are, because it may not necessarily be your writing. And with that, like I've heard that they've like placed less emphasis on the essays, but I think that also like wouldn't be the right step to take, because then the essays are the only way you can really get to like communicate with that person and get to know them on like a personal level. So I think like that is also something that should definitely be paid attention to in the near future.
Vasu, what are your thoughts on that? Yeah, like a big part of higher education in general is that college selection process, right? So you have your standardized testing, which probably won't be impacted too much, considering that's usually all right, pen and pencil, you're not, whipping out a, large language model to help you with that. But a big part of it is writing, right? It's writing, those college essays, and, that's a big part of someone's future. How should schools be handling this? And how even are you personally handling this and finding that balance?
Yeah, I think that's a really difficult question. In terms of college essays itself, I actually have a friend who last year, when he was coming up with his college essay idea, he had entered in a lot of information about himself and some key events in his life into a large language model. And then after, it generated some traits or character traits he should emphasize in his college essay. And so that's one unique way to use it, but I definitely see it playing a larger influence later on. And even to talk about standardized testing for a little bit, when we look at tests like the SAT, the ACT, and how students who are maybe inside sixth grade right now are going to have a different trajectory of learning mathematics and even reading and summarizing articles as they might be using AI more and more. I wonder how that'll impact how they do on these other tests where AI is no longer present and LLMs are no longer there to assist them, to help them go through these problems or these passages.
So I'm gonna go ahead and call out the elephant in the room here, guys, because I think the two of you are maybe the exception to the rule, right? Like both of you, AI enthusiasts here on daily AI podcasts, but not all of your fellow students, especially in the U.S. Share that same excitement and willingness to learn and to use generative AI the right way, right? Because I know plenty of younger kids your age that they don't use ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude in the same way, right? They're using it to just do as little work as possible, right? Write all their papers, outline all their projects, etc. What are some of the downsides and dangers right now for students who are maybe over reliant on generative AI for those purposes?
I think, like, as I mentioned, we have like a STEM and scientific writing class, and in this class, like, we worked on making our independent research projects. And I know like a lot of kids in our class, like Gen AI was pretty big with this class in particular, and like the subject of doing research and writing papers. And I think with that, there is like a possibility of misinformation and disinformation. So like for example, like if you're writing a paper on certain metrics and like stuff you can use to test out some like novel thing that you're researching, and the AI comes up with something that isn't accurate, and you end up putting that in your paper without looking over it, and that could result in like the pollution of the knowledge that you're trying to convey through that paper. And like I think that the dangers of like misinformation with that, especially in like in communication, could be hugely like one of the more like notable dangers of AI. And along with that, like another thing that I do with AI is I use it to code. So like GitHub Copilot and like Find and other AI models, like those are really, really helpful, like with doing like small things and kind of executing your instructions. And if you have like an AI model that's kind of like ending up like writing your code for you, there's like also like oftentimes a lot of bugs that you don't see until later on. And if those bugs, like for example, if you're working on like an actual like larger scale project, or you're developing and producing like a publishing and working on something like that, then that also could be like one of the dangers. I don't know if it's like as relevant, but still worth mentioning.
It's wild, right? Because it all just really depends on when you're born, what your circumstances are, at certain points in your educational journey, right? So I remember before computers, right? If I was working on a project, especially when I was younger, and if I needed information, I'd have to open up what few encyclopedias we had at home. And if it wasn't there, I'd have to go to the library. Vasu, even can you talk a little bit, even in the last, maybe your high school journey, the last 3 or 4 years, how has AI changed what's possible? Because obviously you've grown up with the internet, you've grown up with smartphones, social media, etc. But how has generative AI changed what's possible for you as a student?
Yeah, it's certainly a drastic change as it impacts, I think, both areas very heavily. So inside previous waves of innovation, we've seen how more mundane tasks are kind of taken care of, but we've still had creative thought that we still need in our society. But really with AI, I see it as impacting both industries very heavily. And the reason for that is if I ever needed like a catchy title for an essay, or if I needed something for a project, I just type in some few key details into an LLM and I'd get plenty of answers. And many of these are actually very good answers as well. So I'm really impressed by the fact that AI is able to maintain such high level of creative thought. But alongside that, if I need to summarize an article per se, while there is that slight fear of a hallucination taking place, 9 out of 10 times, I'd say, is pretty accurate. So I'm really able to see how AI has really decreased the load on us. And that's kind of a danger in itself because we're losing these analytical skills. So while Armaan and I have had freshman year where we were mainly not used to AI, so we've really developed some of these skills, I'd certainly say for younger generations, it's probably a lot harder.
Armaan, how would you respond to that?
I know like this may not be the easiest thing to say, but I will admit that it's made me lazy. So there are like some assignments that we do in school that are kind of like they don't require that much thought. I consider them like almost like a little bit brainless in the sense that it's just like going through an article, like finding the certain phrase that matches what's in the quiz and just like transferring that information, or like listening to a video and then kind of like writing some bullet points from that. And there's times when like it would definitely be easier for me to just like do the work and like give like a second of thought to it. But I just like don't feel like doing that. And I end up like just like making a transcript of the video, plugging it into an LLM, or plugging the article into an LLM and answering the question. And I don't know if that's like a good thing. I know like especially if you're doing more important and more like thought inducing work, then that won't always be like viable. But yeah, I'd say that's one of the things that have kind of happened for me.
Oh, 100%, right? And I'd say just about everyone in there is in that same boat with you, especially if you're a power user, right? You always have to find that balance between like handing too much of this over to the AI versus like, okay, should I be doing some of this on my own? I think it's a constant struggle. So we do have a couple good questions here from our audience. So we'll kind of rotate. So maybe first, Vasu, we'll do this one here from Monica. She's saying, are you seeing parents of students either pushing the school to use or not to use AI, but also to the school board, teachers themselves?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. So I'd say that my personal parents, they encourage us to use AI at my household, but I'd certainly say it depends on the parent's background. So if they work in, let's say, the technology department, they're certainly very happy and excited to use AI. And I've even seen some parents who might not necessarily have that technological background encourage it, but I'd certainly say some older generations, like grandparents, they might not be as accustomed to it or not as open to it. But I'd certainly say that many parents that I've talked to have asked us about AI and certainly think that it's the way of the future. So for the most part, I'd say that a lot of parents are encouraging AI, but I know that there are certainly some who believe that we should still have that sole human aspect to us, because if we do lose creative thought, that is one of the things that make us truly human. So it's going to be interesting to see how AI and humans grow to change the definition of creativity.
Speaking of AI and humans kind of growing together, this question here from Meredith, so maybe we'll go to you, Armaan, just kind of asking if you've used AI as a one-on-one tutor. Yeah, that's a great question. Like, how are you even specifically using large language models to help you learn?
Yeah. So one of the ways that I actually have used AI as kind of like a tutor before, this was like especially prominent for me during like for math and chemistry. So I took chemistry last year, and like to help us prepare for tests, like there wasn't that much that our teacher gave us. So I kind of like went through practice problems and had like the AI explain to me like ones that I couldn't understand, and it would do that really well, and I would pick up pretty well from that. And as well as like for competitive math, like there's some like math problems that I can't do, that I don't really want to read the solution to, or I don't understand the solution, and then AI can. So I just plug it into an AI or like a language model, and then it would generate something for me that I could pick up from. But I think like with competitive math, like language models, like on the higher end of that spectrum, it's like it becomes kind of crazy.
Vasu, what about you? How have you even personally used AI to help you learn, to help you understand things better, maybe to help you, maybe, I don't know, maybe in areas where a teacher can't?
Yeah, I've definitely used AI to help with research a lot. So it's really easy to get some broad set of, and also idea development. So to talk about idea development for a little bit, it's really easy to plug in one prompt and say, generate 10 topics or generate 10 ideas. And so that's really helpful to get some like basic information to then maybe even use pure human brainstorming after to get more and more ideas. But alongside that, in terms of like using AI, I've definitely seen like my productivity has increased because of it. Because whenever you hit like a roadblock, so let's say you had like a roadblock when you were writing, you could definitely say like continue this paragraph, and then you could see some ideas of where you could extend your thought, and you could choose one and then maybe even just use human writing to take it from there.
I think we'll do one more question here. So Armaan, Cecilia asking here, I'm curious how AI is impacting communication between students and group interaction in learning. How has that impacted it?
Well, I'd say from like my experience, I don't know if AI has really like had that much to say with that. Like I'd say like people like the way people work in groups is they kind of still like they still talk to each other, and like the groups that I've worked in have still kind of been way more on that human communication side, where like AI just does not play as much of a role. But there have been times in like group projects that involve like ideation, as Vasu mentioned, that we do use AI for coming up with ideas and then kind of like brainstorming as a group, and or we put in like everything we say and like it'll condense it into like kind of notes. I know like Zoom has a great feature for this, like where it has like AI generated notes for summaries of meetings. And when we do meetings for that, or meetings over Zoom, then you can use AI to do that and help us condense our thoughts. And along with that, Yeah, I think like group learning is kind of like in like the same boat.
Mm. Vasu, what about you? And also, like, are there, potential downsides, like when working in groups, right? Like, I always think of, nieces and nephews of mine. I'm looking over there and we're in a group and like everyone's on their phone, like on social media. Like, could it get like that? Like, working on group projects, and instead of, 5 or 6 students being in a group, it's just like everyone kind of pushing a stick of a large language model and being like, come on, finish the group project.
Yeah, I think that's a scary reality that we might begin to see more and more often in the coming years, because at least as Armaan has mentioned, inside our school, we still have a lot of human interaction and communication. But I could certainly see that for younger generations, they'll definitely begin to start not only relying on these AI models more and more, but also might begin to use them within these group interaction learning like opportunities that would go to a level where there's minimized communication from one another, and maybe even just a simple, hey, you use this LLM to research this and I'll use it to research this. And then after we'll just put it together. Whereas for at least my experiences, I prefer to have a human like interaction with the individual. And then after we're like, okay, so we can research this together. We can use LLMs or AI to help us with this. And ultimately we'll get a nice finished product. So it's definitely going to change as those younger generations go into high school and find new and innovative ways to use AI.
All right. And hey, as we wrap up here, because we've talked about a lot, we've had some deep conversations about, should high school students be kind of handing over thinking abilities to AI? We talked about the future of education, some pros and cons and challenges along the way. But as we wrap up here, maybe I'll give each of you a shot. Armaan, what's your one most kind of important takeaway that you maybe want other students to hear, or parents or educators, when it comes to how AI is right now impacting the lives of high school students?
I think that no matter like how much AI progresses, how easy things get, how much you can use it to benefit and make your work easier, you should never like stop emphasizing the need to learn how to learn. And you shouldn't let AI get in the way of that, because that's like the most important skill that you can take away from primary school and like later on in life. It's just like learning how to learn, how to like process and like and consume new information.
All right. And then Vasu, what about you? What is kind of the one most important takeaway that you might want to leave viewers and listeners with?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think to add on to what Armaan said, you should maintain that ability to learn how to learn, but alongside that, you should also encourage AI, because AI is certainly here to stay. And by having kids learn AI inside high schools, middle schools, they'll not only become more responsible in its use, but they'll also know how to take creative pathways in the future outside of high school in their future endeavors to help them not only grow, but also benefit the community as well. So I really think it's important for the education system to embrace AI while simultaneously teaching individuals how to learn.
So much good information. I loved this conversation, being able to, kind of rewind and take a look back at, where would I be, right? 15, 20 years ago. But I think Vasu and Armaan, you guys gave us some great insights on, both opportunity, risks, and the road ahead. So thank you so much for your time and for joining the Everyday AI Show. We really appreciate it, guys.
Yeah,
thank you so much for having us.
And hey, y'all, if you're wondering, like, if you ever think, the future generation, are they too addicted to smartphones? What are they going to do with AI? At least today, I got a breath of fresh air. I don't know about you. And if you're wondering how these two young guys are so well-spoken and really stay on point with artificial intelligence, well, they also have their own podcast. So I did join them on their podcast. So make sure to check out today's newsletter, and we'll leave a link to that. I think I brought some hot takes, actually, maybe more hot takes on your guys' podcast than I do on ours. So you're going to want to make sure to want to listen to that. So you got to shout out these young kids for their go-get attitude. And I love what they're doing, trying to inspire the future generation with artificial intelligence. So thank you for tuning in, y'all. Please go to youreverydayai.com for more, and we'll see you back tomorrow in Everyday for more Everyday AI. Thanks, y'all.
And that's a wrap for today's edition of Everyday AI. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a rating. It helps keep us going. For a little more AI magic, visit youreverydayai.com and sign up to our daily newsletter so you don't get left behind. Go break some barriers, and we'll see you next time.